All right, guys, welcome to our virtual meeting. Guys from all over the country here. We've got West Coast, we've got East Coast, we've got a couple of us here in the middle, and it's good to have all you guys with us. Want to introduce my very good looking friend, Dane Sanders, here. Dane is a longtime friend of mine. We went to college together and knew each other back when we were at Biola. And he is someone that I've always appreciated and just enjoyed talking to. I like the way Dane thinks. I think he's two cups of crazy, but he is my kind of crazy. And so I always enjoy the opportunity to talk to him, and it's always very good for me. Dane, I'll ask you to give us a little introduction to yourself, but I asked Dane to share with us tonight about an endeavor that's really close to his heart, an organization called Tell Me Your Dreams. And it's a very unique opportunity. And just when we were talking, I was like, you know what? This would be good for NCS. So, with that, Dane, why don't you give them just a little bit of kind of an introduction on yourself?
Sounds great. Thanks, James, and thanks, Men, for having me today. A quick bit of background on me. My undergraduate degree was in marketing, where I felt like I learned how to manipulate people to buy and sell things they didn't necessarily want or need. And then I felt really gross about it because I was actually getting good at it. And so I did the next logical thing, and I went to grad school and I studied philosophy. Which, if you guys know, philosophy is what you study in undergrad, business is what you study in grad school. I did it backwards. And of course, philosophy in grad school is a recipe for unemployment or teaching. So I became a teacher, and I ended up teaching at a college up in Santa Barbara called Westmont College. And my training was in Aristotelian virtue ethics, which is fancy, multi-syllable words that just means, can you have a good life? Can you be a good person? How would you actually do that in a broken world? Those kinds of things. And to that end, I kind of had, again, this kind of disdain for business and marketing, reactionary, almost like, if you guys remember the movie Say Anything, where the main character holds the boombox over his head and tries to get the girl, and he's getting interviewed by the dad of the girl, and the dad's trying to figure out, are you going to be able to take care of my daughter? And he says, well, I don't want to buy anything sold or processed. I don't want to process anything bought or sold or sell anything, and on and on. And that's kind of how I felt, this kind of moral superiority to business as a really underpaid teacher. And then I ran across a guy named Seth Godin, professionally and then later personally, who really helped me reframe business on a macro level and marketing on a micro level, and to really re-envision marketing as really a change vehicle, a mechanism by which you can enroll others in good things, not just things that promote consumerism and so on. And I began to fall in love actually with entrepreneurship and a good form of capitalism, and found it profound actually in its ability to replicate and grow good things. And also the complexity of it, that it could grow challenging things. And in the middle of all that, again, a central question of my life was really around, how do people thrive? How do human beings thrive? So fast forward, I was involved in several different startups, for-profit, nonprofit, fundraising in both spaces, doing a lot of leadership work. I've written a handful of books and done that traveling, speaking game for a while. And through it all, have perpetually been wrestling with how do I selfishly become a good person and how do I promote that in others? And it turns out the more I've stared at organizations and how they're run, the more I've come to the conclusion that when we treat humans like resources and not people, things break. People don't show up the way they could. That's why 2/3 of the workforce say that they actually are phoning it in at work, and why in times of COVID, people were under such duress. There was this great reveal where in their workplace, they felt more taken advantage of than they did like they were being cared for in the middle of it. And we're seeing all this kind of symptomatic things come from it right now. My business partner and I and our team, small little team, about 12 folks, we work with organizations where our singular job is to help employees love their job. Because it turns out when employees love their work, they actually show up differently everywhere in their life. But not just their job. What if they could like other pieces of their life where they would enthusiastically get after those things? And we do that by helping employees actually achieve dreams. They literally, identify an aspiration in their life that's distinct from the aspirations a company has for them in their job, and the company pays for them to actually get their job to, or their dream to come true. By the way, I'll fix the video. I don't know what's going on. It's something awry. There we go. But the point of it is when individuals, even if they don't have their dream job, when they feel like the company cares about them enough to support their aspirations, where they don't have their dream job, but the company helps them achieve their dreams, they respond in a kind of reciprocity kind of way, where they give more of themselves in that space. So that's a quick note on Tell Me Your Dreams. It's a lot of fun. But in it, I have come to learn a number of things, especially coming in and through COVID, helping organizations develop better cultures and really identify how do you navigate life when so much of the world is not being chosen by you, when circumstances are kind of imposed on you. How do you actually flourish as a person? And even in the preliminary conversation we had today with some of you kind of threw out little Hilton, your comment early on about, your love for Jesus and your disdain for the moment that you're in. That strikes me as indicative of a lot of people's experiences. And we're going to talk today about a process by which you can interrupt that in a very tangible and meaningful way. So to set that up, I want to talk about the problem. And here's the central problem. Despite the fact that all of us, if we're on this call, we have some ridiculous amount of financial privilege that most in the world have never experienced. We have money, we have possessions. Even if we're unemployed, we have more than most of the world has ever had. We have more information at our fingertips than has ever been had by human beings. We have more connectivity than has ever been accessible to anyone. And ultimately, we have more liberties than any time in history. Yet, most of us don't experience freedom the way we should, given all of these benefits. And it's why, in the middle of COVID, in the month of March in Los Angeles, the suicide prevention hotline spiked 8,000% in 1 month, because it was this big reveal of, gosh, even though we have all this stuff, when I don't continue to have inputs in my life where I am kind of propped up, what happens is what gets revealed is a malaise, a lack of vibrancy, a sense of a lack of joie de vivre, and there's something that's awry with that, especially as Christian brothers. It seems like we actually should be the kinds of folks that thrive in thick and thin, that it's actually not circumstantially driven, but that we have become the kinds of people that are that way, and our models. And candidly, that's not been my experience in looking around churches through COVID, individual men, and it's grieved me. And yet in the middle of that, I've also been shocked to discover that some people, a little crew, not the masses, but a little crew, actually, they found COVID to be not life retracting, but life expanding. They actually found more life in this season. And I would argue it was because of how they related with reality before the pandemic happened and when the pandemic happened. And now as the pandemic is leaving us, they are relating with reality in a more appropriate way. So let me talk about reality for a second. Reality is kind of a big word. So to get us there, I want to tell you a story about in the 1500s, there was a phrase that developed in parts of the English Empire, the Great Britain Empire, around the world, especially like in Ireland, if you think of that area, where they would, in an area where they had jurisdiction and control over an area, they would actually put posts at the edge of the villages that would kind of point to the crazy, chaotic world beyond this post. And they actually would write on it things like beyond the pale. So beyond the pale, there are dragons. Beyond the pale, the barbarians will get you. Beyond the pale, you're on your own, basically. And they drew this contrast between order on the one hand and chaos on the other. And they were doing it to control the masses, certainly, and decide what was kind of morally right and wrong, and to really maintain control. But in that, it's extended. Now this phrase, living beyond the pale, is one that is not uncommon. People have heard that phrase and they often go, what is that about? Well, it's saying what is offensive and what is acceptable, what is good and what is bad. It's if you're within the jurisdiction or within the bounds of order, that's somehow good. And if you're outside in that chaotic world, that's somehow bad. Well, here's the punchline. There is no pale. This idea that ordered life is normal life is not true. Now, it's not to say that ordered life isn't good. Ordered life can be good, but it also can be horrifically damaging to people's lives. And I would argue that we are so ordered in our life, and our expectations of order being normative is so high, that even the entertainment or the kind of the venturing out beyond the pale, what that yields is terror and fear, and a view that out there is bad and in here is good. But in here, if we really look at it, is not so good. In here is where people have all these resources, yet aren't thriving. And just even a couple ingredients of seeming chaos coming into the fold, and we come apart. Now, why is that? Well, it's because, friends, what's normal is chaos. What's normal is a harsh reality. And if we aren't learning, training, even practicing, going outside of what feels safe and comfortable, we end up atrophying. We end up becoming less of what we could be when we're not prepared for the storm. And again, it's not that we don't create order out of chaos, but if we don't go beyond the pale to somehow experience those things and get comfortable in the discomfort, we end up shortchanging our capacity to navigate hard times. So what if instead we were to practice? So to help us get our mind around this, I drew a very sophisticated chart. Here it is. It's a very sophisticated chart. So if you picture an Audi symbol, okay, picture the four rings of an Audi symbol. Now turn it on its head. And I'm borrowing this from a guy named, where's his name now? Bill, I think it's Eckert. And this is what he calls the growth rings. So let me talk about these four rings, and I'll give you a visual context for what I'm describing. So these growth rings are defined this way. The third ring right here is, let's call that order. Okay, order. This is where sun is at your back, wind is at your back, roof over your head, food in your belly. Everyone likes you. Your kids are smarter than the average Joe. This is awesome. Okay. And then up here, we're going to call chaos. And chaos is, it's seemingly out of control, because it is out of control, but it's also the place where out of nothing, like it's out of chaos that God created the earth. It's the ingredients for creativity. It's the mystery of God. When God seems to act outside of what we would prefer, it's probably up in this ring up here. So we have up here, we have chaos. Here we have order. The fourth ring, this is what happens when you make your whole life about order. When you live in order indefinitely and perpetually, and really your life's goal is to surround yourself with comforts, what you end up creating is the fourth ring, which is stagnation. You necessarily will go from order to stagnation unless you reach for chaos, which invites this magical second ring. The second ring, which Bill Eckert calls complexity. That second ring is where you have one hand somehow, as much as you can bear it, one hand firmly on chaos and the other hand firmly on order, and you don't break. Where you actually develop a capacity to venture out beyond the pale and look to explore what seems intentionally uncomfortable. And the ancients all knew this, that if you don't go out and practice living in danger in chaotic land, you're actually not going to do very well when the barbarians come into the city. When you're just not going to be prepared. And our conversation today is, we entitled it 5 Fights You Want to Pick with Yourself, 5 Fights that smart people pick with themselves every single day. Because if you aren't actively picking these kinds of fights, what ends up happening is you are put in a radical position of weakness. And what I want to suggest is, if you run that risk, you actually run the risk ultimately of not having autonomy or agency over your life, which is why when things don't go our way, when someone says, so how's it going? And all of your answers are exclusively connected to circumstances that you have no control over in your life, that's an indicator that you don't have autonomy anymore. But when things, and this is why I loved half of Hilton's answer on how he was doing, because half of his answer was connected to objective reality. God's good all the time. All the time, God's good. We all get that in our conceptual minds. But what if we got it out of a concept and into our physical bodies? What if our bodies believed it at the same level that we give kind of mental assent to? And what I want to talk about is that we can do that together. We can actually practice it. So, quick little side note on this. There's a lot of obsession these days online around finding work-life balance. I work with a lot of organizations and their employees where their primary goal in life is to find work-life balance. If you or anyone you know says that they are after work-life balance, I want to invite you or them to consider the possibility, or here's a little test to see if that's true. Most of the time, people, when they say they want work-life balance, what they really are saying is they want relief. They're overwhelmed with life and they'd like relief, which is a tell that they actually aren't interested in work-life balance. And what they're really interested in is they're because the tell that they would actually be interested in that tension that we're describing, the good tension of going beyond the pale. They would say things like, my life is so ordered. I would like to infuse more stress in my life and somehow grow in my capacity. But no one ever says that. When they say they want work-life balance, they all talk about going on vacation. They talk about time off, catching their breath, some mechanism that ultimately doesn't get them stronger. It doesn't get them to grow, because those 4 rings, the only place where growth is possible, the only place is in the ring of complexity. If you're not living in that ring of complexity, growth cannot happen. And yet, most people, if they're conscious to it, spend most of their life pursuing comfort, pursuing a mechanism by which they experience comfort in life. Now, that said, what I'm not saying, to be clear, is if you're under duress and you are being comforted, that is a good thing. It's a very good thing. It's a gift. It's grace. But that's very different than, how can I build my world in such a way where the only sought outcome that I'm looking to experience is comfort. So I'm part of a group of men called Men of Discomfort. No surprise. And we do really odd things. We are made fun of on a regular basis. We work out 6 days a week. We intermittent fast. We exclusively take cold showers. We get in really cold ice baths. We hold our breath for extended periods of time. We're freaks. And I'm 51 years old. I'm 12.7% body fat. I used to be a Division I athlete. I'm in the best shape of my life, including that season of my life. More importantly, in my mind, my mental health has been radically transformed. I don't wake up in an existential haze like I used to most days. I tend not to drink. And candidly, that was the hardest thing to give up, because it was like this incredible comfort. I'm really high view, by the way, of drinking, cussing, and smoking. I think they're all amazing things. I just don't like when they're used frivolously. Like if you're going to cuss, cuss in the right moment and make it count. If you're going to smoke, have a proper smoke at an NCS meeting and make James Anderson pay for it. If you're going to have a drink because it's celebratory. But don't like, it's kind of like teenagers when they cuss and they just use it as filler words. It degrades the goodness of using those things, not as they turn into vices as opposed to opportunities. But I say that to say, ultimately, this season I've been in it with these men of discomfort, it feels odd that we would actively pursue voluntary discomfort. Doesn't it seem like countercultural? And yet, my friends, I will tell you that I am flourishing in my life. And it's not, I'm not saying that to kind of to puff my chest. That's not the point. It's to invite my friends into a project that most people will never pick. Our tagline for Men of Discomfort is, it's probably not for you, because no one picks it. It's such an, like, this is a bad business model if you wanted to build a business out of it. But I'll tell you this, the folks who do pick it, they're inviting a life in that ring of complexity, and they're doing it in such a way where they are, how do I say this? They're swimming against the current. I honestly, the more I read scripture, the more it seems like it's the upside down kingdom. It's like when everyone is going in one direction, you're swimming in a direction that seems counter to all of it. And it sets up a life where circumstances not going your way has increasingly less and less effect on the quality of my existence. There's complexity to it. My self-awareness is increasing along with my strength. I'm living in my body. I like to say I'm less spiritual and I'm more religious these days. And I find myself in a place of real freedom. But to get there, you need to have 5 fights. And I'll just point to these and we'll have a conversation about it. But these are the 5 fights, and there's a pre-fight. The first fight that I invite every man I know into and hardly ever pick, the first fight is a pre-fight, and it's called wholeheartedness. So how can if you've ever been in a real fist fight, if you're not wholehearted, you're in for some misery. Because a real fist fight, it requires everything you've got. And so picture like a wholehearted, like that level of committedness to it. And that wholeheartedness needs to be applied to 5 areas in our lives. The first is our body. I mentioned that already. Things like a fight in the kitchen, when and what you eat and drink. Imagine if that was a spiritual discipline that we made front and central. What kind of transformation that would happen in our communities. Sleep, like a fight in our bedroom. Certainly a fight in the gym with strength and endurance. I would argue that I've become more Christian the more I've embodied these ideas of discomfort in my life. But it's not just there. It's also a fight with my body, but also a fight in my mind. How do I not be ruled by my feelings about circumstances in my life? Well, that requires like filling my mind, the renewing of my mind, as scripture talks about, around key ideas to expand my perspective, to become more strong and awake, to choose my role in life, to prepare, to travel light, to fuel first, to prioritize the things that are most important, to play a bigger game, to correct course in my life, to be present and to stand now. These are all ideas that when properly lived out, they move from conceptual to practiced, and it transforms the person. These are spiritual disciplines. So a wholehearted fight with my body, a wholehearted fight with my mind, a wholehearted fight with my time. And how does your time reflect what you say is true and valuable? A wholehearted fight with my money. How do the things that I purchase reflect what I actually treasure? What do I invest in? And then the 5th one is a fight with our God. It turns out that good gods love wrestling. Good gods, and by God, I mean ultimate reality, whatever that is to you. All good gods like to wrestle. And to wrestle with God is to get to know God experientially. And one other side note, if you are able to win the fight with God, your God is not God. God always wins wrestling matches. He must be formidable. So inspiring, if your God in the end of a wrestling match inspires fear and respect, because of how impressively large and powerful and intense and capable God is, then you're probably in the right fight. But if you're not in that fight wholeheartedly every day, body, mind, time, money, God, friends, how can we say we are being disciples in this kingdom? And that's where I want to open the conversation. There's lots to talk about how to go about starting these fights, and maybe picking one fight at a time and making it minimally viable or easy. But what's more important is that we take the fight on every single day, and we commit to it in conversation, especially with men, especially with folks who would be willing to be in that fight alongside and encourage it. So let me pause there. James, I don't know if this is resourceful to you and I dialogue first, or to open it up, but what would be helpful?
Yeah, just run through those the five again. Like, just so one is wholeheartedness, the other is my body, which
Well,
is
actually, sorry, I kind of made it confusing. There's actually 6 fights, but the wholeheartedness needs to be in every fight. So I need to wholeheartedly be in the fight with my body, wholeheartedly be in the fight with my mind, wholeheartedly with my time, wholeheartedly with my money, and wholeheartedly with my God. And even there, let me go a little deeper. So the fight with my body, all that means is like embodied reality, like getting what you know how you can have mental assent to something. You can go and hear an amazing sermon on a Sunday, and then you forget it by Monday morning. And I would argue that's because it stayed as a mental construct and didn't find its way into our physicality. It didn't find its way into like a lived out embodiment of what we say is true. So an example of that might be, so God is good. Okay, really fundamental, basic. We say God is good all the time. And then you find out from the doctor that you have stomach cancer. So how do I embody that? How do I live into that? How do I take this concept and actually viscerally work it out through my body? Now, that arguably is both a fight with my body and a fight with God, but I want to get it into my bones through the experience. And that experience could be honest, real conversation with other human beings, where I'm Christian and honest at the same time. It also could mean a fight with my mind, where I actually have to wrestle with, what do I actually think about bad things happening to good people? Maybe I'm not so good, or maybe there's something in this maturation process as men that I still have yet to learn, and there's gold in these hills if I'm willing to enter into it and lean in and resist getting cynical, and so on. And but each of the fights, whether it's embodied reality with our body, what actually runs us in our minds, time is what you actually focus on, money is what you actually value, and God is what you actually believe.
Oh, that's great. So do you find that these sort of disconnects between these ideas and embodiment, do those typically come around some of the well-known, they're almost like the platitudes of Christianity, right? So we say, some guy will say, "Oh, I just found out, yeah, I've got stomach cancer. My wife has stomach cancer. Will you guys pray for me?" And somebody always says, "God won't give you more than you can handle."
Right.
I always find that a little offensive, because the way I think God does that is by us, right? It's like by being in community and saying, "I'll hold your arms up," because we have plenty of evidence in the Bible where God has given them more than they can handle alone, but not in community. Do you find those disconnects often happen around those kind of tried and true, the platitudes, the things that grandma crocheted on a plaque or a pillow?
Yeah. Well, the rub with that is the platitudes are true,
Yep.
right? But they're not experienced.
Mm.
And so if someone else says it to me, it doesn't matter if it's true. If the receiver isn't in a position to receive it in a way that, like, I'm actually getting it in my bones. And when that happens, it just lands as empty and tinny.
Yeah.
So I think the best thing we can do, to your point, when we're with someone who's in that state, isn't to kind of offer a platitude, but it's to live the platitude. to be that resource to someone in that kind of moment.
Mhm.
And tangibly, like, probably not, you don't need to talk about it much. Just be if you have the good fortune to be in a place of resource when someone has need, and you can provide that resource, it's either God blessed you or you did something to earn or to be in a position where you have something to offer. It's good to offer it, and not just because they might offer it to you later. It's just because it's actually worthwhile at that point.
Mhm.
And before that, and just the platitudes don't work. So, but I think more resourceful is to think, if you're in that position and you get the bad news, what kind of like what COVID did when COVID happened, it wasn't just bad news. It was a reveal of what did we actually hold as true. It revealed what actually ran us. Like, why did streaming services go through the roof when COVID happened? Why did alcohol sales go through the roof when COVID happened? It's because we ran out of coping mechanisms. You know, we went to why did Amazon go explode? Because everyone started buying. It was like a sport. And I'm guilty. I'm right there. Like, it was a reveal of what actually was running me. And it was an invitation to go, well, wait a minute. It's so starkly obvious that that's happening right now. What small move could I make to swim against that current? When it becomes, so I wake up on a Monday, I get bad news from the doctor, and I react. The goal is to like not deny the reaction. I reacted negatively. I don't. It's a moment of atheism where I don't believe in God and I'm upset and whatever. But if I can shrink the time between that reaction to putting my body, putting my mind, putting my time, putting my money, putting my wrestling match with God in a place where I'm moving toward a more true belief, even those platitudes, then I can find myself as an individual, not because someone's saying it to me, because I'm moving towards the truth of what those words actually are meant to be. That's an act of faith. And that little bit of faith can actually expand my ability. I mentioned stomach cancer because one of my best friends, he's a stage 4, he's a former Ironman and is one of my Men of Discomfort buddies. He and I started the thing together. He's got stage 4 cancer right now. I'm telling you guys, this guy's flourishing as a human being right now. Flourishing. And it's not because of anything that anyone's doing around him. It's because he had put himself in a position where he was, and the Lord knew it, was ready. His boys are watching him. His community is watching him. And if he breaks statistics and is one of the 5% that lives beyond 5 years through this journey, I suspect the Lord's going to do tremendous things through this individual. But it didn't start when he got cancer. It started way before. And he put himself in a position cooperating with God, where he didn't just believe in God, but he trusted that God believed in him and was moving in a direction where he was going to collaborate with God in his kingdom to embody more reality, to get his mind running off of truths, to have his time ordered around the things that matter, and to have his money reflect those investments, and to be so with God in the middle of his life that regardless of the news, like, he's probably going to die, but I've never seen the guy more alive than right now. It's just shocking. A guy that comes to mind that I know many of you guys know is a guy like Peb Jackson. Like, for those of you guys who don't know, Peb is a hero to many of us, but he's that kind. He's so busy living because he's living in a kingdom world. And if you look at actually how he's lived his life, I think you'd see a lot of evidence of these kinds of fights that he's been in day in, day out. And forgive me if you guys don't know Peb, but he's someone that comes to mind that I know is close to James. But so much of this is like, for me, I feel like I'm becoming a Christian finally through this process, in a not just a get into heaven kind of way, but in a lived out experience of God and his kingdom.
Yeah, you mentioned, Dane, like, it almost seems like your friend getting that kind of news that you've got stage 4 cancer, like, that seems to sort of jump to 5, wrestle with God. What do I believe?
Yeah, right.
believe about God, and then it seems to almost reprioritize the others, and then it tests your pre-fight, which is, are you all in? Are you wholehearted to it?
Yep.
And it seems like, yeah, that would actually, I'm sure that you would say that he's very much reprioritizing his mind, his body, his time, his money,
Mm.
based on the reality and the chaos that he's living in.
That's right. That's
So,
exactly right. And the truth is, you don't have to wait for a cancer verdict to start that process.
mm,
Like, I think that's the kicker, right? So, um, Greg mentioned before we started the call that, he's in the middle of a transition to a new season in his life. And I think he's not alone, right? He's representative of a lot of folks who have been in hard moments, or have been, are, or will be. And it's not like we should be surprised that the world is chaotic. Like, my friend Todd Henry likes to say, that last he checked in the state of California, the mortality rate is 100%. Like, everyone's dying. 100%, all of us. And it's like, if that's so, what are we doing? Pretending like that's not true, comforting ourselves, putting off the inevitable. And it's funny, the Stoics, they get this. They practice dying every day. And in a sense, when you put your body in discomfort, when you put your mind in wrestling matches, when you prioritize the things like calling your mom and being in conversations with people that are challenging, and when you invest in kingdom things that come at personal sacrifice, and you dare God to keep his word by the way you live life out,
mm,
you become a different kind of person. And it might even look like little things, like quiet times, like scripture reading, like prayer, but in my experience, and this is what the renovation of my own life has been, is the centrality of starting with our body is particularly relevant at any age, in any circumstance. Some kind of intentional discomfort with our body. It turns out, like, voluntary discomfort is way more comfortable than involuntary discomfort. So putting yourself in that position actively on your own, it invites them. It's why spiritual disciplines like fasting are so central to our progress and to our growth and faith in Christ.
I love that phrase, a renovation of our lives. And, I mean, I'd like to think, I mean, for all of us, we'll open this up for some discussion here, but I mean, I'd really like to think that that's why we're in NCS, is that we're looking for um, a, a renovation of life, a change. I think we're always looking for ways to become aware of better ways or better things. And it occurs to me, and in my own life, my experience is that those things are always better found or implemented in community.
Mm.
And I would venture a guess that all of us are involved in a church community. Um, but I find that a lot of churches are teaching a history lesson
That's
and
right.
not a thriving or a vibrancy lesson. And while they may present a challenge to this renovation of life, um, that we don't often find the challenge of holding in tension that chaos and the order that Dane was explaining. So I really, really like that. And so, guys, a big value of these meetings is always the chance to interact. And um, some of us will be in chaos and some in order and some sliding somewhere between the ping pong balls. So, anybody have a thought? Like, is there one of those that is hard for you? Um, is there one of those that's
If
been particularly difficult to implement or believe, especially maybe in this last season of chaos?
if I may, I watched something this morning on YouTube, and I start the day. I watch kind of a devotional on YouTube. It's a series, and it's really good. But I switched over to a retired police officer. He was with the California Highway Patrol for many many years, and his first job, he stayed there for a long time, was not guarding the bridge, Golden Gate Bridge, but that was part of his turf. And so, very like within days, he was confronting people who wanted to end their life.
Well,
They've gone over the barrier, and they're on an I-beam and they're ready to jump.
Hmm.
He didn't have any training whatsoever. And so as time went on, he learned on the job. He learned took an FBI course. He got better negotiation skills. Da da da. So in all in his career, and he's retired now, he saved over 200 people from jumping,
Hmm.
but he lost many people as well. And he learned early on that when they let go, he was told to watch where they land to mark the spot. But he said he couldn't do it anymore because he couldn't get their faces as they're falling out of his head.
Hmm.
But I want to ask everybody, what do you think the percentage of jumpers were between men and women? How many were men percentage wise? How many were women? I'll just throw it out there.
70 men, 30 women.
Okay.
I'd say 80-20.
Okay. It was 95 men, 5% women.
Wow.
95% men. So I have a little bit of a problem with the dream, the job, because most people would look at the two biggest employers right now in our country. We have Amazon and Walmart. Do you think those people love their job? I mean, would any of us want to move packages all day long on a shift, like a robot, or greet people at Walmart? And then I look back at the Bible, and some of the heroes of the Bible started out a career as a shepherd. And I'm thinking, okay, that's probably not a bad job, because how much stress do you have? Really, you stand out there with your staff all day. It's like watching paint grow. I mean, there's not a lot of stress. But if you fast forward like to the Middle Ages, you had people who were building these giant cathedrals that we can visit today, Notre Dame, and all these great cathedrals. And those families, like the father was a stonemason, he would spend his entire life working on that one building, knowing full well his sons would do the same. And many times it was his grandsons that were still building the same cathedral. So their life was in an order, because it's like, okay, my job is to build a cathedral for God, but I get paid, I feed my family. And there's probably stresses. I'm sure there was people who died on the work site, but during this time there was wars, famines, plagues, and yet that church kept going up because the church was behind building it. The money was there. So getting back to job and dream, most people go to work to a job they hate because they need the money. They need the money. Now, I have a buddy from church. He runs a business. Now, he owns many companies. He's very wealthy. And he came close to totally being wiped out in the last recession, 2008, 2009. But when he gave me a tour of his headquarters, he had this wall with all his employees, and there was these bars. And I said, "What is that?" He said, "Oh, that's their measure of current debt in their household. And as they work that debt down and down and down, they're going to get a bonus when they have relinquished all the debt." Now, it's not about their house, but their cars, their, credit cards and all this stuff. And I thought, okay, normally, who would want their debt out there for everybody else to see? Because everybody walks by that hallway, all the employees. And he turned it into a sense of pride that I'm working down my debt. So if you think about it, debt causes what? Stress, divorce, family strife, problem after problem after problem, because debt. Before COVID, I read a number of studies that said the average household, and these are working people, that 50% of the households couldn't come up with $500 to save their life. And yet we're the richest country in the world. So that's pretty sad. And that was pre-COVID. I don't even know what it is now. But moving on, I think that it's almost a privilege in our country to have a job that would be our dream job, because we put so much emphasis on job, on money, and so forth. And when I lived in Europe for 6 years, Europeans always said, "You Americans, you live to work. You live to work, but we work so we have a better life, so we can enjoy our life." It's a big difference. They
Yeah,
don't want to put in the 90-hour day.
it seems like another one of those
Sorry?
platitudes, right, that we throw around pretty frivolously of, if you love your work, you'll never work a day in your life, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's kind of
So,
frivolous.
Dean,
I'm done then. Thank you.
how do you think about that idea that Bill just shared about most people go to a job that they really don't have any investment in or even hate just because it's a necessity of provision.
Yeah, I don't disagree with them. I think that there's a lot of folks that that's true for, and not just, Amazon workers. I was in a conversation once with friend, I think to you all, and a friend of me too, Paul Young, wrote The Shack, and he was asked like what's the elephant in the room that no one talks about in church life, and what's the biggest threat to church growth? And he said, or telling the truth in church, and he said, job security, because pastors, they don't feel like they're freed up to actually say what they're believing and how they're growing, and because they're going to lose their job, because if they're not falling into the kind of the mold. But the point is that I'm really trying to agree with on Bill, and I'll offer a different perspective on one part of it, is that there's no question if people feel like they're a cog in a wheel, that's not going to be a recipe for human flourishing. If you want to flourish as a human, you need other ingredients besides helping other people get their dreams to come true, to be part of somebody else's corporate enterprise. And I think the example of your friend, Bill, who helped employees get out of debt, what that does is it creates meaning at work. And if you have skill and agency and you're applying towards a particular purpose that is individually owned, that actually does promote human flourishing. So if they can enroll people in their company to see getting out of debt as getting into more freedom and removing stresses that are toxic and can hurt the family and so on, that's very similar to what we do at TMYD. It's why the dreams actually have nothing to do with the corporate interests. It's the corporate paying for the individual's interest for them to actually see those aspirations happen. And most of the dreams are things like getting out of debt, buying their first home, learning how to do something they've always wanted to do, traveling the world, and so on. And when they have those fundamentals in place, they find meaning. And when they find meaning, they show up different, they engage, they stick around longer, they become an attractive place to get hired, and so on. So I think that if you want to flourish as a human, and you want to facilitate the flourishing of other humans as an employer, then I think there's tremendous opportunity in investing in the dreams of the employees. I think that's good capitalism. It's stakeholder capitalism, and you'll find you'll get better results from them. But that's not why you do it. You do it because we're good humans. But there's a strategic benefit to it. It's not altruism either.
Well, and I think about what Bill was saying about, stonemasons building a chapel. Two things came to mind when you were mentioning that, Bill. One is almost all those people were involved in like what used to be a common practice of apprenticeship. So you usually worked with someone, under someone, you learned, and you didn't just learn how to do it, but you learned the craft of it. So you start by chiseling square blocks, and then you move up to being able to create beautiful, very difficult aspects of things like cathedrals and things. And it also reminds me, made me think of legacy. And it's kind of like, what will be here when I'm gone? And for a lot of people, what will be there when they're gone is debt, right? And it'll be the things that, we have a great house in this great place that isn't paid off. And, we've got a great car that you'd love to have, but you'll have to pick up the payments now that we've gone on to the big shop in the sky. So definitely, there's a sense of legacy in that, and a sense of community in old-fashioned apprenticeship, which is, just gone by the wayside now. We just hand people papers and tell them where they can, file them. So the eponymous TPS reports from Office Space. So, hey, I got a note here. Chris Sloan had a question. So Chris, if you want to unmute yourself there. And
I do. Thanks, James.
yeah.
Dane, thanks very much. You mentioned Stoicism there, and I was thinking as you were challenging us, it seemed to be a challenge toward a Christian Stoicism, if you will, the whole embracing chaos and remembering your death, etc. And, very Pauline in that regard. And I'm very attracted to that. I don't know if it's a product of the times. I see that it's kind of a renaissance
It
of
is.
Stoic thought right now. And
Yeah.
would you see the fights you're talking about, the discomfort, the men of discomfort you're talking about? Are you somewhat advocating a Christian Stoicism? And is that a good thing? Because
it's a great
that's
question.
appealing to me.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, trying to be a Christian Buddhist, or there's Buddhist ideas that I find really compelling. There's Stoic ideas I find really compelling. I do think that Christ and what he modeled in his kingdom, probably there's concentric circles of Stoic thought, and going all the way back to Socrates, way before. Like, it wasn't just Marcus Aurelius. It wasn't just the guys who formalized Stoic thinking. And we are in a Renaissance moment. It's funny, I had a chance to interview a guy named Ryan Holiday, who right now is very popular in the Stoic world in terms of popularizing Stoicism. And he's done some really good work. And he's probably my favorite atheist, who is slowly but surely, I think, going to become a Christian. So I do think that there's things that if you are in that practice of Stoicism, you probably will come up against a mystery that is bigger than yourself, and you might just find God in the middle of it. What I don't like about Stoicism is how impersonal it is. It can feel hyper individualistic, and it's about me and what I'm doing, and I'm going to be kind of a lone ranger Stoic. And although there's some benefit from it, it misses the personal nature of interacting with a real God in our lives. And that's where I feel like it can fail. But the principles underpinning it, they point more to, I think, a reality that regardless of your faith tradition, it's hard to ignore. The chaos of life, regardless of faith tradition, most faith traditions acknowledge chaos and order as fundamental ideas. If you want to read Jordan Peterson's last two books on Antidote to Chaos and Beyond Order, which is 12 Rules for Life that connect to responding to too much order in your life. And I think they'll both be resourceful. And they have Stoic ideals, but the underpinning is really a Christian narrative that invites a bigger sense of reality than just the stark nature-driven harshness. God created out of chaos, but it included goodness and order, and not the kind that stagnated. So that's the part where I would stop short of becoming a Christian Stoic or a Stoic Christian. But there's lots of things and lots of traditions that I find are probably universally true.
Yeah, I think, I've always said that a lot of people are on a search for truth. And if they're being pure to that search for truth, they'll pretty much always find Jesus. And that a lot of these ideas, even though they might be packaged in labeled within a faith tradition of whatever, they tend to always have an ingredient of some aspect of what I would call discipleship or faith practices that totally align with the Christian kind of ethos as modeled by Jesus. And really, I think it's really a sifting of what's BS and what can we actually trace back to the model of Jesus's life, or things that God said, the examples he gave us, those kinds of things. Because I do think there's a lot of just floating nothingness, fluff. And I think we know that most, I think even most call them Christian faith experiences won't hold your life. I personally found that 11 years ago, is that I had a little Jesus that looked like Kenny Loggins, and that God on my Sunday school wall looked an awful lot like Zeus, and that the flannel graph version of the truth of Jesus's interactions stripped away reality that made Jesus very vibrant. And when my life basically, pancaked on the ground, I realized that Sunday school Jesus and the Sunday school faith I had was not enough to really build a life on. And I had to go and do some deep digging and some personal stuff. And that search for truth always leads us back home. But I don't think we can, shove off this idea or that idea that, maybe have been, become pillars of certain trains of thought that are outside of Christianity, that we can't just label those as, that's their thing. I think God reveals a lot of truth, and there's always things we ought to sift through and evaluate. I think it's always a very good practice.
Chris, can you give a quick response? Just, I know we're almost done, but I want to be.
Well, thank you both. Yes, I obviously, I mean, Ryan Holiday is great. Enjoy him tremendously, and some others, but ultimately it comes down to the question of logos, right? I mean,
That's right.
Is Jesus the logos or not? I mean, that is where I think the Stoics miss out. And I understand the improbability or the impossibility of, there's that very metaphysical part of Stoicism that's not just about austere practice in life. It is a whole religion unto itself, if you will, if you take it to its full extent. But if you recognize Jesus is that truth at the core, that's what personalizes it. I don't know that they're compatible. I see it in Paul in certain of the ways you're talking about, which is very practical ways, which Paul clearly was familiar with the Stoic thought. And I've just been fascinated with, whether it's like a Jordan Peterson type of application or whatnot. It just seems very popular right now. And I have to admit, I've been kind of captivated by, wow, do I need more of that in my life as well?
Maybe the practice of those things may be resourceful. I think some of the reasons why guys like Ryan are not Christians is because they look at Christians and they go, really? Like, that's it? They're just not, we're not very impressive.
Yeah, exactly. And a couple of them have come out of Catholicism or Christianity.
Of course. Yeah. And this is not like I'm not, I just want us to practice what we say we believe. And if you look at Jesus's life, there was a degree of austereness in it, a lot. And if you don't think there's chaos, read Revelation. There's complexity in this world. And if we're kind of hunkering down, hoping for the best, the way Francis Chan likes to talk about, where people's prayers, like, how can I get cozy and die in my sleep? You're not going to experience much of the kingdom life. And it's ironic that the Stoic practices might actually get you closer to the kingdom life, especially if you actually have relationship with Christ in the middle of it. And I think that's where there's gold. So Chris, you're invited to Men of Discomfort anytime. Let's go hang out. That'd be great.
I love it. It's Christianity with cold showers. I think that's what we need these days.
Dude, I know. That would preach. ChristianityWithColdShowers.com. That would be great.
Yep. Chris, if you don't mind me asking, like, when you say that kind of a shift in that mental idea and sifting through some of those Stoic practices and disciplines is attractive to you, if you don't mind me asking, why is that appealing to you right now in this moment?
Yeah, great question, James. I don't know. I think that's what I'm trying to figure out. And one part is I'm doing the very thing that Dane is talking about. You're looking at Christians and Christianity, especially our behaviors and attitudes during this pandemic, and you're questioning everything. And you're seeing things, as Dane said, you're seeing things revealed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't like that. And that's me. And so I'm mirroring some things just from, the past, and kind of, whether it be in Stoic philosophy, and primarily that probably for me, that can help you see yourself as part of the larger picture and be that man of discomfort. I mean, I hate to say it, but I think Dane's right on it. But I think it is just looking at what's going on, what's happened in this last year, being dissatisfied with my own discipleship, and trying to figure out life.
That's right, Chris. That's what we're talking about, is discipleship, fundamentally.
Yeah, what if the theme was, the discipleship, disciples of Christ, living it out? It's probably not for you. How much better would we be vibrant, in church life and in community, where we talk about hard things and address and push each other, exhort each other, really is a great biblical term. beyond
Yeah.
encouragement, but exhort each other into discomfort and places of mystery. I think that's such a great word. And how much better would we be if that was a label that, like, hey, this is a hard journey. And so therefore it's not for the faint hearted, or same with NCS. And there's a phrase I use a lot around NCS, which is just what if men were in relationship and had a community before Christ showed up on their doorstep? Because we do a great job of catching men when life deals them the uppercut to the chin. Like, we do a great job of catching men. I think the goal for us is to actually help them avoid the uppercut. Um, some of them are self-inflicted, like myself. I brought chaos on myself through choices and standing on that I-beam on the Golden Gate Bridge and saying, I might jump into something dangerous. And I think we bring a lot on ourselves. And there are some that are, brought into our lives that we don't have any control over. But I love thinking about NCS as the goal being, let's bring men into community and relationships and real friendships before crisis shows up and they suddenly realize they need them and don't have them. Um, that's truly one of my goals within NCS.
Yeah, the gift, I think, this is one of the reasons why I've been a fan of NCS for so long, is I think that's exactly right, James. I think you are anticipating the consequences of a chaotic world. So I think it's good and right that you're catching folks, because it's probably not for you. It's because if it doesn't feel, it takes some degree of maturity to go, hey, we are dying. Hey, there is chaos. Hey, I want to get ready for it. There's a reason why all the metaphors of like the virgins not trimming their wicks and stuff are in play, because it's not for everybody. Not everyone's going to do it. And yet God is still gracious. But I'm just not interested in waiting till I die to experience heaven. I'm interested in actually participating in that now. And if we're going to model our lives after Jesus, he was called a man of sorrows for a reason, and he seemed to be full of grace and joy. So how did that work? And when he talks about the Beatitudes, the ways that he navigated his life and what he committed himself to, and not puffing his ego, like even the idea of like admonishing and calling people out, that could land like in the equal but opposite of the tropes you mentioned earlier, where now it's all bravado and like, come on, let's go, and promoting ego. And I don't think that's the answer either. My experience of being discomforted is it's a very humbling experience. and then I get to be humbled again. But it just so happens that humility is a road to the good life. Humility and pride actually is death. So all these things that the Bible has been talking about that we hear, but we don't have ears for. I would argue that when we embody these ideas by intentional discomforts, we just start developing eyes and ears, and we become the kinds of people who can catch the people. Which I think, especially for folks who are committed to NCS right now and happen to not be in duress, I hope you're in training, because we're going to need you in those moments when people need catching. And I think why it's so important to, however modest, whatever level of faith you can muster, it's worth your effort to pick a fight somewhere in your life.
Yeah, well said. I was at a camp this last week with my daughter. She's 14. It was just dads and daughters. And I did plenty of things that were well outside my comfort zone. I was reminded daily that I'm no longer 25. I experienced pain in muscles every morning that I was not prepared to have massaged or icy hot on hand to take them away. We did a lot of really challenging things. There were great metaphors of faith, great metaphors of my relationship with her in these coming years. And, we did rappelling, we did whitewater rafting. And, Dane, to your point, they said there's two kinds of rappelling. There's voluntary and involuntary. So one is where you're going under some level of control. The other is where you're hanging after reaching the end of either your capability, strength, or sure footing. And same with whitewater rafting. They said there's swimming, which you should ask permission for, and then there's involuntary swimming in the river, which is where you're knocked overboard. And let us teach you how to float along in a safe manner till we can grab you, so that your problem of being washed overboard doesn't turn into something more serious. And yeah, I think if we don't anticipate um, the movement of our lives within these rings that Dane showed us, I think we're set up for a really unpleasant surprise. And that level of unpreparedness, I think, will make the sting worse. And yeah. Anybody else a thought before we wrap up? Yeah, Greg.
Yeah, I think for myself, the big thing in the Christian journey has been, um, once we receive Christ, life is supposed to be comfortable. Things are supposed to be good.
Right.
He works all things together for good. We repeat these verses, but we skip over the verses that, Jesus says, hey, there's going to be troubles in this world. You're not going to, if you're a follower of me, you're not going to be liked. And I think Tim Keller, I love the NCS message. I've listened to that Identity, and him and John Piper, those messages several times. And it really goes to our expectations. Is if I'm expecting that everything's going to go perfect, and when things don't, where's my God? Where's my faith? That's really where the rubber meets the road. Is, okay, I'm basically telling God he's to be my cosmic butler, and I'm the God. And so I think for myself, that's where the wrestle has wholeheartedly been in, is, okay, well, it's like the Psalms. It's like, well, God, if you're so good, then why is this going on? So for myself, it's really having to deal with those expectations that I'm owed, or this shouldn't be happening to me, versus, okay, God, you are good. I don't understand why this is happening. Help me get through this. And I think the last thing is, if we go to the gym, we're expecting resistance. It's a given. If we're going to grow muscle, you got to have resistance. But now shifting that over to other areas in our life, why is that not the case? And I think it really needs to be a wake-up call of, you can't grow and become who you want to become. I mean, even for myself, unless I'm pressing into those areas that I'm, fearing rejection, or I'm fearing that I don't have what it takes, or, the uncomfortableness. I think for myself in business, I've trained myself very well to do that. It's like, no, I'm still going to do it. I don't care how I feel. This is part of my business. But now, if I go to other areas, like I'm still single, so if I want to ask out an attractive woman, okay, why am I not still in that area? And so I have to recognize and push through those fears. So
you actually, Greg, don't have to. You get to.
Yes, you get to.
Right. You don't, because the proof that you don't have to is, look at lots of people say they have to go to the gym, but they don't ever. And guess
Right.
what? But if you relate it to it like you get to, then everything changes.
Yeah.
Everything changes.
Yeah, that gym analogy, Greg, is great for kind of what Dane outlined in 5, that you don't ever go in and just do curls 5 days a week, right?
Curls for girls. Come on. What if you want to get the girls?
Probably not for you. We go in, and you do curls, and then you do something with your legs. You do something.
Right.
I mean, you switch, the muscles every time, much like Dane has outlined, the resistance needed for the wholeness of life in all these areas. And yeah, your verse there that we don't often quote, you don't see a lot of t-shirts in the Christian bookstore or crocheted items that say, in this world you will have trouble. We don't often buy or sew those items, do we?
No.
Anybody else with a thought
James?
to wrap up?
Yeah.
Yeah, Hilton.
James, basically, life is complicated, and I echo a lot of stuff that you guys are saying. I think NCS is critical in helping men towards that healthy life. And I believe that when everything's said and done, everything boils down to relationship. if this loving relationship with the Lord and loving relationship and I'm surrounded by loving relationship, whatever the world throws at me, I can handle it with the help of God and with the help of friends and relatives. I think the problem is, as I look around me, those are lacking. Even I, as a Christian, I don't know enough about God. I really don't. God is like created the whole universe. How much do I know about God? Even Jesus, I don't know much about Jesus. Because of that, I don't feel the power that's promised by the scripture. I just don't sometimes. And that's one aspect of it. Another aspect is friends.
Hilton, can I pause for a second on that real quick
Yes.
before you? So how would you actually go about getting to know Jesus?
Okay. For me, it's going to Bible study, study the words, study what the Bible says. Let's put it this way. If our faith is real, there is such thing as the Holy Spirit. It will nudge me. If it's real in a person's life, there's something that nudges me. For example, I'll give you an example from my life. It has always been anchored since the very beginning. Highest command: love God, love others. When I'm not feeling loving, the Holy Spirit let me know without any doubt. And if I can't change it, my feeling, I pray for help. I pray, Lord, I can't do this. You have to do this for me. And from my experience, it works. Sometimes it doesn't happen overnight. And there were moments I fail again and again. But as time progresses, I fail less. And that's one aspect with the loving God part. For me, it's a growing process. And another thing is, I have to find people that I could have relationship with, because if I don't have that, a part of my Christian walk is missing. Relationship with others, love God, love others. That part's missing, and that's why I believe I echo what James was saying before. NCS offers that. And with that said, Dane, in reference to Stoicism, in my opinion, the little that I come across, it's a process where I could get to know my fellow human being. It's a process where I could learn to love my fellow human being. But it's not the means to an end of Stoicism. Stoicism is a practice. It's a tool that one can use to love other people, to know and love other people.
It can be. It's a philosophy of living life. There's no question.
It's a process.
But I guess where I want to press, Hilton, and I want to invite you to consider the possibility when loving God is primarily an act of your mind and not an embodied reality.
No, that's not true though.
Okay, great.
I'll give you an example. I'll give you a perfect example. Going back to what you were saying before, stagnation, order, complexity, and chaos.
Yeah.
Okay, before my faith, I cherish order. Okay.
Yeah.
And as a result, there's stagnation. I don't care. I'm having no problem in life. I don't care. But once the faith comes into my life, there's responsibility to act. For those who have much, much more than expected, it echoes in my mind. So the faith itself doesn't promote stagnation. You say, at least in my life, it says, this is what the Lord give me. I should maximize what the Lord want me to do with it.
Yeah, I would say based on the number of sticky notes stuck to the wall behind you, you practice a chaotic order, which I appreciate very much. I go through sticky notes like you wouldn't believe. Yeah, I mean, I think what we're talking about is really the very thing out of Romans, renewing your mind, and it's a self-assessment and preparing ourselves for the truth that Jesus did say, that Greg reminded us of, which is, in this world you will have troubles, and that any belief other than that is really a fallacy. It's just not a reality, even as Jesus said. So, Dane, last words for us, and then I'll close us with a blessing.
Yeah, just an encouragement to find something minimally viable in your life that makes you intentionally uncomfortable. And whether that's practically in relationship, finding someone that has a personality that bugs you a little bit, you can hang out with them. Maybe it's fasting, maybe it's exercise, maybe it's I don't know what it is individually for you, but to somehow find a way, some minimally viable thing that you do every single day, and then take a look at it 6 months, 18 months from now. If you've done that every day for that many days, see if that doesn't have a dramatic impact on your capacity to live out the things that Jesus had capacity to live out. So that's the double dog dare. And if you don't do that, at least pray for me, because that's what I'm doing. And it's hard. And I like friends. So it'd be nice to not do it on my own.
Dane, tell me this, like, with fasting, I understand sort of the mental practice connection to it. Like the cold shower, what's the mental practice that goes with that? Like in fasting, you're removing something. And when you remove it, that hunger reminds you to be hungry for some specific aspect.
Well, my experience of fasting is I want to eat, and I'm removing something I'm removing something that I could have that I don't have access to anymore. And I experience in my body not getting what I want. It's very similar to like every day that I'd have a cold shower. This morning, I didn't want to get in the cold shower. Like nothing in me was like, oh yes. It was like, no, I don't want to. But there's something profound that happens when I go anyways. And then in that, it's not very long. We're talking 20 seconds before it normalizes and you're fine. But practicing to submit to a rule of life, especially when I don't want to, almost always, I can't think of a time when it hasn't borne fruit. If I can just breathe my way through it, I'm more present. It's actually like expedited fasting in my experience. I get right to the feeling that you often have to wait 18 hours for if you're fasting. But I think both are highly valuable. It's just good to feel hungry and not, and be reminded in my body that I need God. And the other benefit is when I actually get to eat or actually get a warm bath after a cold shower, those are some of the most glorious moments in my day. So it's not to be austere for austere's sake. It's not to beat my body up because I don't like me. It's to be willing to walk outside the pain the pail rather, so that I can get closer to God. Because that's actually where I think God lives. And he comes in here in order sort of just to help us along the way. So I don't know, long-winded answer, but that's my experience of fasting in cold showers.
That's awesome. Well, guys, while we were here, I was able to access some quick statistics as well. And apparently the mortality rate of NCS men is also 100%. So I guess we better get our crap in order. But I loved this, Dane, especially talking about the circle where the tension is, and that tension is the place of mystery and creativity.
Yeah.
And it also promotes need. And again, I think NCS is a place that can meet specific needs very well.
Do you guys read Richard Rohr as a group? Have you ever come across him and read him at all?
Yeah, I mean, I come across certain things. People send me a lot of stuff of his, and I think he has a lot of very good thought processes. Again, it's a monastic, sort of thought process, which again, I think can yield very good chaos, right? Like, I mean, usually what it is it's around some level of chaos and uncomfortability. It's something unfamiliar.
Yeah.
I find some of his thoughts a little squishy, I'll say. So I don't take all of them, but I sift through ones I think are very valuable. Awesome. And ones that I'm like, oh, okay. So
cool.
Well, I'm going to close us with a blessing. I did give you a warning right up front that I said that Dane was 2 cups of crazy, but he was my kind of crazy. He's proven me right once again. And, let me close this with this blessing. It's one of my favorite verses. It's very applicable to this. but it's from Isaiah 42. So let me just pray that over us. I will lead the blind by ways they have not known. Along unfamiliar paths, I will guide them. I will turn darkness into light before them, and I will make rough places smooth. These are the things I will do for them because I am their God, and I will not forsake them. Lord, may that be true in our lives, because we all have darkness, blindness, unfamiliar places, and plenty of rough places that need smooth. So let us lean into the truth that you'll do that because you are our God and you will not forsake us. In your Son's name, amen.
Amen.
Guys, thanks for joining us. Dane, thanks for joining us here and sharing some of what you've been experiencing in life.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers. See you guys.